I am that Paul guy, and it's Thursday. Okay, so recently we've been talking about affordable CPUs, and even though prices of GPUs are starting to come down a little bit, we were talking about budget CPU options. And it kind of got started because I found a 3100, basically a Ryzen 3 3100 in a market where you couldn't find any Ryzen 3s. I found it for 150 bucks, was able to get it, found out it performed really, really well. It performed great, and it did, it did a phenomenal job, exceeded what I thought it might do for a 4-core, 8-thread processor. So that got me thinking, okay, now 150 bucks, that's not a horrible price, but it is still a little bit much. Were there some cheaper Intel options? So I went ahead and I got an Intel i3 10105F. Basically, it's a slight upgrade of the 10100. The 10105F does not have a video solution on it, but I went ahead and tested that against the 3100 to see how it would do. And it did slightly better than the 3100, and it cost, probably, it was $88. So it cost a good, we're talking about $50 or $60 less, which made me wonder if we could get another Intel part for that $150 budget, and how would that stack up against the Ryzen 3 and against this 10105F. So we're in the process of doing that, but in the meantime, AMD has thrown some other cards on the table with not one, not two, but 6 new sort of budget type options for their 5000 series and 4000 series processors. So their current gen processors, and actually stepping back one generation, they're launching 6 processors that are all going to be within $300 and under. And you think $300, wow, that's still a little bit high. But there are a lot of options that are down as low as $100. So let's talk about those for a second. The first processor we're going to talk about is the Ryzen 5000. It's actually a 5700X. This is just a little bit of a downclocked version of the 5800X, which is currently out. It retailed for about $450 when it first came out, and everybody thought, ooh, it's a decent processor, but that's priced way too high. Well, since then, it's dropped down to probably about the $350 range, which isn't horrible, but the 5700X will come out. All these are coming out next, I believe it's the first week of April, like April 4th is when they're rumored to be coming out. This is slightly clocked below the 5800X, and it will come in for $299. This is a 5000 series. This is running on the current Zen 3. This is a PCI 4, but there is a caveat to that we're going to talk about in just a minute. The next one down is a Ryzen 5 5600. The first one, the 5700, was an 8-core 16-thread. This one's going to be a 6-core 12-thread. This is a slightly downscaled version of the 5600X, which is 6-core 12-thread, and it's going to come into the market about $199. So a little bit less cash on it on the onboard, a little bit slower clock speeds, still very solid, still 6 cores, still 12 threads. And I mean, we're talking about $200. That's not horrible at all, especially for Ryzen 5. Then we step down just a little bit. We're going to go to the Ryzen 5500. This, I believe, if I'm looking at all this correctly, is actually a little bit of a downscaled 5600G with the video cut off of it. So it's just going to be the straight 6-core 12 thread. It is going to be, I believe, on Zen 2. It is going to be a PCI 3. So that means the first 2 that we mentioned are going to be on PCI 4, which means all of your updated. And it's not really going to make that much of a difference unless you're into high-speed storage or if you have an RX 6500. For some reason, AMD has, who knows what, but it runs much worse on the Generation 3 PCI lanes than it does the Gen 4 PCI lanes. Otherwise, you're not going to notice much of a difference in anything except for, like I said, high-speed storage. So this 5500 comes in. It is 6-core, 12-thread. It is built on the last generation, and I believe it. If I understood this right, it looks like it's a little bit downsized 5600G. And it's priced at $159. So now we're getting down into that budget range that we were talking about when we were looking at the 3100 that I bought for $150. if I can get a 6-core 12-thread 5500 for $10 more, that opens up a whole new arena of things we can play around with and compare with. But that's not all. Because AMD has also taken a mess of 4000 series CPUs, and they're bringing those out to us as well. Starting with the 4600G. Now, this is not a new CPU. This CPU has been in things like the HP pre-built that I built last year, or that I bought last year in about May or so. Very solid processor. We did some comparisons between the 4600 and 5600Gs. This does have a graphics solution on board. It is built on Zen 2. It is 6-core, 12-thread, and it will run at $154, I believe, retail. Now, that's slightly less than the 5500, but remember the 5500 is built on the 5600G. This 4600G is the previous generation, and there's been a few people that have asked about that 4600G that I don't have anymore because it's in a friend of mine's computer. So I will have an opportunity to get this processor again and do some more tests with it. It was great. It did a great job, and I was very pleased with it. But now I'll get an opportunity to bring this back in and do some more tests. Again, $154, slightly less expensive than the 5500, which is the downscaled version of the 5600G. I know this is a lot to keep up with. But basically, you take that 5600G that we compared with the 4600G before, you take the graphics processor off of it, and basically now you have that 5500G for $159. You have the original 4600G that went into a lot of HP pre-builts and things like that. That is going to be $154. But that's not all. Next, we're going to talk about the Ryzen 5 4500. Now, I believe they took a 4600, probably lopped the graphics off of this one as well. It is going to be a slightly slower version, not by very much, a little bit less cache. Still 6-core, still 12-thread, going to be $129. So again, we're getting way down into that budget range, and we're fitting a lot of people's needs where if they're just trying to start a system, again, all these fit on the AM4 platform. All these are on the generation that AMD currently has out. They have not gone to AM5 yet. So these all fit on this current platform of AM4. So all these motherboards out here are going to, it's going to work. So this $129, great budget option for that, but still there's yet another one that comes in at just under $100. It's $99, and it's basically a step up from the 3100 that we tested before. This is going to be the Ryzen 3 4100, 4-core, 8-thread. It's going to be a little bit less. I mean, we tested that 3100. This looks to be a little bit better than that 3100, and it's $50 cheaper. So that in itself, when you're looking at a budget thing where, I mean, maybe you can start up, and we've already proven that 4-core and 8-thread is great in most games. You're going to get really, really good results. I was quite surprised at how well it did. It's going to handle all of your modern day tasks, all your regular, email, office processing, a lot of gameplay, all that stuff very, very well. You're not going to have any issues at all running with a 4-core 8-thread, at least until you get a chance to upgrade it, which once again I told you, you can do on this AM4 platform. Now, to give you a rundown of a few things that come with or are included with or whatever, to kind of recap, the first two that I mentioned, the 5700X and the 5600, will be on PCIe 4. The other ones are all on the previous generation PCIe lane. Only going to make a big difference if you either have an RX 6500 XT or if you are looking at high-speed storage solutions. The 5700X will be like the 5800X in the fact that it does not come with a cooler. All the rest of them, I believe they come with a Race Stealth cooler, that built-in CPU cooler that usually comes in the box. Very capable cooler, especially because all of these are going to be, they're all 65-watt CPUs. They are all being a little bit lower power. That means they're not going to get as hot. They're going to run very, very well. And even if you have moderate airflow in your case, you're going to be fine with temperatures. You're not going to be worried about overheating these. I don't know so much, and I haven't found out so much about the overclocking of these. The X CPU, like the 5700X, should be able to be overclocked. I don't know if any of the rest of them can be. We might have to tinker with them and find out. But the main thing with the AMD processors is you don't really need to overclock them. It kind of self-defeats the purpose. Once you do that, you're kind of interfering with their own optimization. So I wouldn't even worry about trying to overclock it at all. I would go ahead and make sure that whatever memory you have is overclocked, or used whatever profile, I believe it's DOCP profile, that's in your BIOS, just to make sure you're getting the full 3200 or 3600 or whatever. Pre-builts might not have that option. You're stuck with what you got, but you know what? All these CPUs should be very capable of taking care of that and handling that. So you shouldn't have any kind of issues at all. Now, this does kind of bring to mind two different things here. One is because they're pushing all of these budget type options out now, that means that when they do upgrade to AM5 later this year and they do start introducing those, we're not going to see any lower priced Ryzen 3s or budget type Ryzen 5s in that series for a while. That they're pushing these at a very late in the AM4 cycle, which means AM4 being the socket. They're pushing these very late in that cycle, which means that they are probably looking to take care of that AM4 platform for quite a while yet. I wouldn't see them trying to push these out the door and then 6 months from now saying, oh, by the way, we don't support it anymore. I wouldn't think that would be the case. I would think there's still going to be BIOS updates. There are still going to be some things that support for different motherboards. For instance, I believe the 300 series motherboards will also now start supporting Ryzen 5000 series chips. Don't quote me on that. That's rumor, and I've heard a few people mention it, but I'm not 100% sure. But it does tell me that we're not going to get budget options on the new platform, but they should be able to support this AM4 platform for at least another couple of years. So by the time you get these budgets, you might be able to get something a little bit later on, like say you're getting a 4100 or maybe a 5500, and you put that in your computer for now because you're worried about your budget and want to make sure you get a decent GPU. Well, later you'll still be able to upgrade that. Say if you want to go to a 5700X or 5800X or even to 5950X, you should be able to do some upgrading a little bit further down the line because it still should be supported, at least software-wise, with BIOS. And I would think the parts would have to be companies selling these like Asus and MSI and all that would have to continue to sell an AM4 platform for a while, especially with these processors just being released like they are right now. So I found this out and I wanted to share it with you, and I am still in the middle of doing some other benchmarking and testing and some other stuff that we'll share later, especially when it comes to comparing graphics GPUs with budget type CPUs. But now we've got a whole plethora of more stuff that we can test and we can look at, especially for somebody that might be in a little bit of a budget. So if you found the video helpful, go ahead and throw a thumbs up on it. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to visit me on the other socials. I just figured I would share this information when I found it out. These are going to be available, I believe they said April 4th. It's going to be in the first week of April. Not to be outdone, because AMD is releasing the 5800X 3D, which is supposed to have the extra layer of memory, that cache, on top of the chip, so it's a different way of processing it, and that's supposed to be the new gaming crown, or the gaming king CPU coming out, but that's not going to be until later in the month. These 6 are due out within a couple weeks, and if you're looking for a CPU and you're already on the AMD platform and you're not looking to spend a whole lot of money, it might be a very good option for you. So once again, that is all I have for right now. Do all those YouTube things for me. I would really, really appreciate. And until next time, I'll see you later.